the first availability group topic is this concept of contained availability groups. And this is really exciting. It is definitely a V1 solution right now, and we're going to get into that and talk about some of what I see as the gotchas or things that people are going to run into with this. But one of the Achilles heels of availability groups, backing up, talking just a little bit of history, right? We started with database mirroring, right? For any given database, you could mirror that database synchronously or asynchronously to another server. And there was a process that you could fail over manually, fail that over. But there wasn't a listener, and some people did stuff like that with DNS names. It was a very manual process. It was database by database, right? So in many environments, we have multiple databases that are all related to each other and need to be primary in the same place. So that brought us to availability groups, which allows us to have a collection of databases in an availability group that are read-write or primary on one node. And we have copies of that being replicated to other nodes. We access it through a virtual IP name, virtual IP and host name called a listener. We can have it automatically fail over. There's a lot of great stuff about it. And I would say at this stage, AGs have been around for a while now. 10 years. So yeah, a while. In terms of just the customers we work with more AG environments than non-AG environments. So it's definitely mature technology. The Achilles heel has been that anything that is instance level in your availability group, logins, everything in SQL Server Agent, jobs, operators, alerts, things that are like linked servers, credentials, anything that lives in the master or MSDB databases on your SQL server are not part of the availability group, right? So you run into things like, I've got these jobs that need to run on the primary, but I also have to create the exact same jobs on the secondary and do something so that when it fails over, the jobs will run on the new primary. And there's a lot of things, we've done. People do things like add a step 1 to every job that says, hey, am I the primary? If I am, continue to step 2. Otherwise, complete the job, reporting success. If that's on both nodes, right? But it's kind of a hassle to manage all that. Logins, right? Every login that exists needs to exist on all of the nodes in the availability group. And if they're standard logins, they have to have the same SID, right? So if you've worked with availability groups at all, these are common issues that we run into, and people have done various things to kind of keep those in sync between the nodes. So in 2022, Microsoft came out with this concept of contained availability groups. What happens in a contained AG is there will be AG-specific copies of both the MSDB database and the master database, right? So jobs, jobs, operators, and anything in SQL Agent that's inside the contained AG will exist in the AG's version of MSDB. Any logins, credentials, link servers, things like that would normally be in master will be in the AG's version of master. And we're going to look at this if that's confusing. The key point to remember is that this does not replace the instance level master in MSDB. And what you are connected to is going to determine what you see. So this is the part of it that I think is a potential gotcha, right? If you connect to the contained AG listener, everything in your master database will be in the AG specific master. Same thing with MSDB. You also only see availability group databases when you're looking in Management Studio, right? So in a regular AG, in SSMS, you're going to see all of the databases, whether they're in an AG, not in an AG. If you have multiple AGs on a server, you're going to see all the databases, right? And you kind of have to look in the availability group to see which databases are in which AG. So in Object Browser at SSMS, you're only going to see the AG databases. You can still say use DB name or use a 3-part name and use those databases. They're just not visible. Which brings us to, you know, what I see, one of the 2 big limitations on this that people are going to run into. The first is around tooling, right? There's a lot of things that when you're working with a contained AG, if you're in Management Studio and you're used to using the GUI to do something, doesn't work, you'll get an error. You try to script something. So, you know, you need to be accustomed to, and we promote this, we prefer this anyway, you know, really managing your environments with code, with SQL scripts, PowerShell scripts, however it is that you're doing it versus the GUI. The other thing, but that's related to that is, you know, there's an awful lot of code out there that says, hey, go to the master database and do this. Well, which master database, right? So everything from monitoring tools to Microsoft tools to our own homegrown stuff is going to have to account for that. There's also a laundry list of things that you can't do with a contained AG that you can do with a regular AG around, you know, log shipping, replication, and there's a Microsoft doc that so you just need to make sure that all the things that you do are supported in that availability group. Okay, so with that, let's take a look at this. What I have here is in my SQL Server Management Studio, I have a 2-node cluster, Lab 2022A and 2022B, right? And if we look at that, in fact, let me go over to this, to the console itself. Right, so if I go to Failover Cluster Manager, and I pre-created this environment, the cluster, and a couple of AGs, because it does take some time to create and sync AGs, even with small databases. So we're kind of do the cooking show thing where we'll look at how you would do this, and then here's what it looks like, right? So I've got my cluster. It's in Azure, so I've got a Cloud Witness, cluster name, and I actually see 2 AGs on here right now, and we're going to talk about those. I have a contained AG and a standard AG, right? So, but to start with, let's go back to Management Studio, and let's just kind of go through how you would create a contained AG versus a standard AG, right? This is one of the areas that the tooling is a little bit behind. So I created my contained AG with code, with SQL scripts. That's going to be the way you're going to want to do it because the wizard, there's some pieces missing. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go on one of these nodes and I'm going to say I want to create a new availability group. And as I go through this, I give it a name, AG2, whatever. It's on a failover cluster, and I just click contained, right? Reuse system databases can be confusing. The only reason this is here is if you had an AG already, a contained AG that had its system databases, and for some reason you removed that AG and wanted to put it back, you're just saying those system databases already exist. You don't need to create them, so you wouldn't lose all your jobs and logins and things. So normally you're just going to say contained, and you're going to go through and you're going to choose the databases, so forth that you want to use, right? So let's say I wanted to put this database in it, and it's pretty much the same as normal in terms of this wizard or the process for creating an AG. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to go through the wizard. I'm going to generate a script. So we'll go ahead and say automatic synchronous on both replicas. I'm not going to worry about a listener right now. Automatic seeding, I was not able to get to work with the contained AG, but that may have been a function of my environment. And so I typically do manual seeding anyway, full database and log backup, give it a path, all of that. This is all just the same way anytime you are creating an AG. What I'm going to do though is I'm going to click script, and let's take a look at the script that it created, because it did miss some things that are important. This is a SQL command script, right, so that we can connect to the different nodes. So this is very similar to what you will see when you create any AG, right? A couple things here. In the create availability group command, notice it has contained, right? So that's just a word that you add to the create AG command, which tells you that it's going to be contained, where your replicas are, so forth. Okay. Now notice what it did is it did the typical backup of the database we're adding to the AG and restore, backup and restore, wait for the replica to start communicating, and you're done. Okay. This will fail if we run it. What they haven't added in the wizard is that you need to add those other databases that get created manually, right, to the AG. And so when I did this the first time, not realizing that, I went through all this and it still wasn't healthy. I literally just went to the contained AG availability databases and said add database, right? I'm on the wrong node for that, but that's okay. But you can see the databases that get created, right? So up here, okay, so we did all that. We created our contained AG. Up here, I'm connected to the node. And actually, let's go over here. Our contained AG is actually primary right now on 2022B. So let's go to the instance connection. So we're connected directly to the node name and see what we see on this guy. We see the contained AG. We see these two, master and MSDB, and notice the name of those databases. It's the name of the AG underscore master, name of the AG underscore MSDB. You cannot control those. That's how SQL Server knows what it's going to be. And if you look in these databases, if you look at system tables and things, you'll see some of the same tables, right? You'll see sys jobs, you'll see sys operators. Master's a little bit more interesting because sys server principals isn't a name. And so that's kind of, that's a little bit different. But so I see, and what we have two availability groups, right? We've got our contained availability group on A and B that has those three databases as part of it, the contained AG database and the two system databases. We also have a standard AG that has just this normal AG database in it. But when I'm connected to the instance, I see all of those databases. If I am connected to the listener for the standard AG, I see all of the databases, right? Which has always been a little bit weird for people, right? Because I'm connected to a listener and I see my normal AG, which is this, and it says it's synchronized. That's the AG that I'm in, but I also see these other three databases that are in a different AG, right? If I, in fact, let's fail this over to the, let's see, that's standard, yep. We're going to fail this over to node A as primary because that node actually has some databases on it that aren't in an AG at all. So the way to think of this is that when you connect to the listener for a normal AG, it's really just another IP that will connect you to the primary, and you're going to see all the same things on that connection that you would see if you were connected directly to the node. And that's how it should work, right? We connect to the listener, it always gets us to the primary. If the role changes, we're in good shape. All right, so we've moved this now to A. So if I refresh my databases, I've got a couple of databases here that do not say synchronized because they're just standalone databases that are not in an AG, right? Okay, compare that to my contained AG. If I go to the connection to the listener for the contained AG, my databases that I see, my system databases are master MSDB and tempDB. These are going to be these two databases, right? So if I'm connected to the instance, this AG name master is what I'm going to see here. Same thing with MSDB. I also only see the user database that's part of the AG, right? So let's see practically what that means, right? Everything is going to be context based in what you're connected to. So here I am on 2022B, which is the primary for this guy. Refresh that. Right, so if I go down here and I say, okay, here's my logins. And if I go here and I see my logins, one of the things you'll note is that most of the logins are the same. When you create that AG, it's going to create it with a copy of the instance level master database on the instance that you created it on, the primary. But that's not going to stay in sync after that, right? So it basically took all the objects that were in my master database, created its own master, but notice there's another login here called test-contained that I see in logins when I'm connected to the listener. I do not see it when I'm connected to in any other way. Okay, so if I create a login here, connected to the AG listener, call it test2. We'll give it a blank password because we actually don't care about this login. Don't do this at home. Okay, so I now have this login, test2, and this is a login like any other login, right? So I can go in here, I can assign it server roles, I can map it to databases. Notice the only user databases that are going to show, databases are going to show up are the ones in the contained AG. So I could say I want this to have a user there. It's going to create a user. That user is going to exist on the other copy of the database, of course. But the difference is that master database that this is all in is part of the AG and is being synchronized to the secondaries. So I don't have to create this login in multiple places, right? But the trick here is going to be I have to remember to connect to the listener to create the login. If I go and I create the login up here, and we call this guy test3, that login exists on B. It is not going to exist on A, because we would have to create it on both nodes in a regular AG. And it's not going to exist. Oh, that refresh was too high in the tree. It's not going to exist in the contained AG, right? So this is a really cool feature. I'm actually really excited about this because this is one of the biggest challenges a lot of our customers run into with availability groups. But you need to be very aware contextually of where you're doing things, right, in your databases. MSDB works the exact same way, right? So if I go to 2022B, the actual primary node, and I go to say SQL Server agent, and I look at jobs, I've got all these jobs, right? Mostly maintenance jobs in this environment because it was created for this, right? If I go to my contained AG connection and I look at jobs, I don't see all those jobs that were created on each of the instances. I do see this job called test, right? So that's a job that I created from within the context of this connection, right? Which is actually kind of great because when you look at things like backup jobs, maintenance, things like that, there are jobs that you're always going to have that should run on every node that are unrelated to the availability group. But if you create your jobs that are dependent upon the availability group inside that AG specific MSDB database, now they're AG aware. They're going to run only on the primary. So that's contained AGs. I think this is a really cool feature. Like I said, I think it has the potential to solve a lot of problems. I think a lot of people are going to implement it maybe without completely understanding some of these nuances and potentially get themselves into trouble. So that's contained AGs.